If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by E.J. Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
So the Knicks fell to their cross-round rival Brooklyn Nets on Saturday. The Knicks got down big early, played from behind pretty much the rest of the way. They were able to cut down the lead to about 4 late in the game, but that's when Nets star Kyrie Irving showed that he is the superstar that he is. He had a pair of clutch threes in the last 2 minutes that put the Knicks away. He finished with 32 points. Let's lead all scorers in that game. Jalen Brunson added 26 in this one. This is the Knicks' 9th straight loss to Brooklyn. It makes me sick to even say that, but that is the facts. 9 straight losses to the Brooklyn Nets. So, Tommy, what went wrong on Saturday for the Knicks?
Yeah, I think obviously the defensive issues, played a part. But at the end of the day, you got to tip your hat to Kyrie. I thought the defense on him was solid. A lot of those shots were contested. IQ played well defensively. Grimes did his part when they switched off on him. McBride, put his hand up, and Kyrie was, relatively quiet over the first 3 quarters, but then we know he took control in the fourth. And, it's been one of those situations where, having a dynamo, a real, unstoppable force on the offensive end is always a difficult matchup. We saw Jason Tatum go crazy in previous contests. And, Knicks we're on the short end of the stick in that way. I think the part that stings is that, Ben Simmons didn't play, so like obviously KD was out, TJ Warren was sidelined, even though Simmons and Warren have negative, have basically hurt the Nets in recent weeks.
Right.
It would have been nice to get a win over the Nets, if for no other reason to make those previous wins over the Cavs and, the Celtics stick. You kind of feel like you're giving one back after you had won 2, but that's what basically middle of the road teams do. That's why the Knicks are have been within a game or 2 of 500 for most of the season, but they still have another opportunity to play against a motivated Lakers team starting tomorrow evening. So we'll see if they can get back on the right track.
Yeah, I think this Knicks loss really kind of highlighted why, superstars win you these kind of games. Like the Knicks right now don't have one. They have really good players, and we saw some of those guys play really well. Jalen Brunson had 26. RJ Barrett had another really good offensive game. But I mean, quickly had another really great game. But like at the end of the day, when you're trying to beat a team like that and you're coming from behind, you're gonna need to either A, match their superstar, and B, get those stops. And it makes me kind of curious, when we get to the end of the conversation today about some of the trade rumors, maybe they're trying to get, part A of that is someone who can get stops against a guy like that, as opposed to part B, which is then finally getting that superstar. But the Knicks didn't have that guy that could match Kyrie down the stretch, and Quinn Grimes offensively did his best.
But I'll say this, EJ, on the superstar conversation, I'd rather have Brunson long term than Kyrie Irving. Like I don't know what the Nets are going to do. I know he's kind of harping that he wants a contract. I'm going to be fascinated to see how that free agency plays out this offseason. Another team's offering. If I'm the Nets, I'm happy with the 1-year deal. I guess we bring him back and see how that goes. But I'd be shocked if another team was willing to offer him, a 3 or 4-year deal. It'll be fascinating to see how that plays out.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, and I agree with your sentiment, by the way, because as great as Kyrie was, Kyrie might not be available next week for any reason. Right? He's very unreliable, so I would definitely take Brunson over him. But just the point belies is the fact that they don't have that superstar shows that when they went against another superstar talent, even though the Knicks, I think, had more talent than the Nets in that game for sure.
Yeah,
it wasn't enough to overcome. I think also. It also belies why it's so important for the Knicks to be ahead in the fourth quarter, honestly. Like, how many of these games we've seen them, be ahead, like in Boston, and, Tatum starts to get going, and they're able to kind of just survive because at least they were playing from ahead as opposed to being playing from behind. When playing from behind, and now you're trying to get stops and score and execute offensively, that's been too tall a task for the Knicks all season. We haven't really seen – I can't remember a game this season where they've come back in the fourth quarter being down, 10 points or 11 points. Like that hasn't really happened much.
But what was interesting? One thing I found interesting was thinking about it in that fourth quarter. is how much better and fluid and quicker and
Yeah.
more pace and tempo the Knicks played down by 10 points, and then they cut it to 3 or 4. Then if they had been up by 10 points, that's something to keep in mind next time when they have a lead, is to not to reverse the strategy, use that same strategy like we talked about previously that got you there.
Yeah, because when you're playing from behind, you're playing with a greater sense of urgency because you can't
Yes.
waste clock.
Yes.
And it's funny when you watch some of these really good teams, like when they're trying to close, the teams that are very good at closing, they play that way, even when they're up. Like when they're trying to play, they're getting into their stuff quick. It's not just hold the ball, hold the ball, hold the ball, throw it to one guy and then just wait. Like they're running really good action even at the end of the games. So the Knicks, you hope that they can maybe learn from that. And to be fair, this was the first game after Tom Thibodeau said they got to play quicker in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
So, now this was a different scenario because they were playing from behind, but maybe this is them listening to the coach, and maybe this is a coach, imploring that they have to play this way. I think the situation maybe makes it more like they kind of had no choice, but you hope moving forward that you do see some of that execution because they executed offensively pretty well. Like even with Kyrie hitting those big shots, like the Knicks, they scored in those two possessions in between.
Yep.
They scored a basket and Brunson had 2 free throws. So it wasn't like, they were putting pressure on them to keep scoring. The problem was they couldn't get those stops. What did you make of the substitution patterns? I think in the fourth quarter have been talked about with RJ, IQ, and Quentin Grimes. You have a game there where IQ gets subbed out late in the fourth quarter. He had been playing great. RJ comes in. He had sat for some of that fourth quarter. Do you think that's something that the Knicks will have to kind of figure out, or you think they're kind of doing it fine the way they are, which is it seems like essentially by committee. It's whoever's playing the best or playing the best at that moment kind of plays most of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, and we kind of predicted it as soon as when RJ was sidelined and IQ and Grimes kind of established himself as a closer because IQ has been a closer. As I noted, he leads the league in fourth quarter minutes dating back to the start of last season,
Right.
And he's earned every minute and every second of it. It's really hard to overstate the progression we've seen from Emmanuel Quickly, both offensively and defensively. This season has really stepped up his game. And is really playing at a high level. So it's difficult to keep him off the floor in the fourth quarter. One thing I would like to see is, especially when the Knicks have a timeout late in games, end of game situations, is to have IQ and Grimes on the floor together, and taking Brunson out because Brunson's just not as good a defender as those two.
Yeah.
It didn't exactly present itself. It wasn't like there was a last, a possession where that was going to decide the game, and if they got a rebound and or miss, they'd call timeout and they could reinsert
Right.
Brunson. But that type of thing will happen going forward. And I would like to see Tibbs have the kind of the guts to yank Brunson out and put one of his top defenders in. We'll see if he does that. And the other thing, I think it'll probably be kind of a game by game situation, whether it's either Grimes or Barrett. Might be matchup determined by matchups. Barrett was especially on the offensive end. Was playing well in the second half Saturday night in Brooklyn. So Grimes, as much as I've credited him in the past, he needs to knock down open threes in order to stay on the floor. He just hasn't done that of late, and that's something that he really needs to do in order to ensure his spot in the closing minutes. Because that's the last two games, it didn't come back to bite him against Boston, but it did hurt him against Brooklyn, and it's something we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and earlier this season we saw Grimes hitting some of those big shots, but he's been missing them of late, so he's gonna have to knock those down. And I think you make a really good point about the decision to potentially bench Brunson on offense defense situation because it's not something I've mentioned, and I don't think I've really seen anybody talk about, but I've noticed it in games prior where the Knicks have been in clear offense defense situations, and he has kept Brunson in no matter what. There may have been times where maybe you get rebound, you want to get fouled. I don't know, but like to me, it was one of those moments where I felt like Tibbs was kind of a little bit coaching on autopilot. Brunson is great at taking charges, and I know that may sound like a small thing, but he almost won a game in Memphis earlier this year because he took a charge on the final possession. So there could be reasons why Tibbs would like to keep Brunson on that floor, but I agree. I think that there are plenty of opportunities to have IQ essentially guarding your one, Quentin Grimes guarding your two. Now you have a really solid backcourt defensively on the ball as opposed to Brunson, who you kind of have to hide in those situations. So I think that's a really good point. When we come to these Nets losses, 9 in a row, it doesn't feel great for Knicks fans, I'm sure. Like, is there anything more to read into why the Knicks struggle? Because it's not like the Nets have had a better team than the Knicks over the last 3 years, but the Nets have had injuries. They've had a lot of things happen. There was a game where KD and Kyrie didn't play, and the Nets came out from game packed from 20 points at MSG. Do you think this is starting to become a mental hurdle for the Knicks in getting over the hump against the Nets?
I don't think so. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that one team has Kevin Durant for most of those games, and the other team doesn't. And then it's especially the fact of KD, Kyrie, and Harden
Right. Yeah.
when they were a trio. So yeah, listen, I have to admit I'm a little surprised at how much I shouldn't say. I mean, there's a lot of talking back and forth between Knicks Twitter and Nets Twitter. But the one thing to keep in mind is the Nets didn't sign KD and Kyrie. Their expectations should be higher than we beat the Knicks.
Right.
Over the last 2 years, they have the same. Since the start of the 2021-22 season, the Knicks and the Nets have the same number of playoff series wins, the same number of playoff wins. Nets got swept. Knicks didn't make it. Obviously, the Nets are on track to be a top seed this year. So we'll see if they, if Kyrie's still on the floor and KD stays healthy. But again, the expectations of that from Nets and there was a lot of, well, you guys said you were a super team and now you come here, you can't even beat, Knicks fans are more, have never claimed that they are the better team than the Nets. I think they're just their fact that they state is that this city belongs to the Knicks in terms of fan base and fandom and ticket sales and interest. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
I do agree with that last point on there, that this is always going to be a Knicks town, and that is essentially the crux of the beef, because the Nets say, well, we have a much better team. And it's like, well, nobody cares about the Nets. The Knicks are the team of New York. And that seems to be where the clash happens. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, these Nets games are frustrating because you don't want to lose 9 in a row. I mean, that's crazy, especially when you're talking about your rival. I think you do make a good point that obviously when you got KD and Kyrie, and at one point you had Harden, wins are gonna be hard to come by. But I don't know. I do feel like there's something with especially when they go to Barclays. I think the games at Madison Square Garden, I don't know if I put much stock into them, but the games at Barclays seem to go like the exact same. Like they come out flat. They don't seem to come out with the right kind of energy. And then they make a comeback, and then they can't execute or make enough plays late. It's the same recipe over. I've seen this same game that I saw on Saturday at least 4 times in these 9 losses. The exact same. The only thing that was missing was the Julius Randle meltdown where he goes after the refs and wants to kick over some chairs because he didn't get a foul call on the last possession or two. Like, that's the only thing that was missing. So when I see the same thing over and over again, it makes me think that something is up with this. I don't know why the Knicks struggle with these games so much outside of the fact that the Nets have talent, but it is becoming, frustrating. I don't think it's anything more than that. It's just you don't want to lose to your crosstown rival 9 times in a row. The Knicks will get 2 more cracks at the Nets. It won't be at Barclays. It'll be at Madison Square Garden, so maybe things will be different. But tough loss for the Knicks. And you mentioned a good point. When you think about the wins over the Celtics and the wins over the Cavs, you had a chance to make a rivals week sweep. Go 3 in a row. It seemed like it was right there on the table for them, considering the injuries the Nets had, and the Knicks came up short. So they'll have to find a way to rebound and turn the page on Tuesday. So the Knicks, after Saturday's loss, will return to the national TV scene yet again on Tuesday when they host the Lakers on TNT. So another national TV game. So some people that will excite them. I think for a lot of people that will frustrate them because they know it'll be more probably more Knicks slander and combined with the Lakers. I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna be happy listening to that broadcast, to be honest.